your nation, your province, your Southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello and thanks for joining us. Hundreds of Canadian Armed Forces troops from Edmonton are heading to the interior of British Columbia to help in the aftermath of mudslides and extreme flooding. Minister of National Defence Anita Anand says 350 troops are ready to be deployed from a base in Edmonton to the hardest hit areas. She says some soldiers from an immediate response unit are already in BC and heading to Abbotsford. The rest of the troops will follow later after consultation with local authorities in BC. And as many in BC are dealing with flooding and power outages following the massive storm that hit the province, David Lease is the VP of Frontier Centre for Public Policy based in Abbotsford, BC, and he joined us via Zoom earlier this week. Here he is in an interview with Hal Roberts.
Now, David, the flooding in your area of Abbotsford not only impacted people, but also a lot of livestock, including chickens and cattle, that were virtually wiped out. This will really hurt the supply chain.
You know, this is a devastating story, not only for this community, but really for BC as a whole, and I would argue for the country. In this immediate community, I mean, the devastation impact on people as you have literally, thousands of people across BC being evacuated to different areas, and then the impact on property as well as on animals. The devastation on the poultry industry and the dairy industry will be profound, as well as greenhouses and so many others. So this is a very, very sad day.
Now, many people may not realize that the Port of Vancouver is quite large, supplying a lot of our needs throughout the country. And due to the storm, it's now only working at a fraction of full capacity.
Yeah, this is a devastating impact on the supply, the logistical chain that Canadians count on every day. So the Port of Vancouver is our country's largest port facility. It's certainly the second or third in the continent. So when that port facility is not working well, because we have two of the major railway lines that have been knocked out, as well as the two superhighways, the Trans-Canada, as well as the Coquihalla Highway, among others, this is a perfect storm. So this is going to have a big impact on everyone's daily lives. And that's why you see hundreds of people lined up at grocery stores already out of concern that this is going to impact them.
That was David Lease, Vice President of the Frontier Centre for Public Policy, joining us from Abbotsford, BC.
Alberta's United Conservative Party's annual general meeting began Friday in Calgary as Premier Jason Kenney deals with rising discontent in his caucus party and from Albertans. Kenney is expected to deliver a keynote address Saturday, and party members are to debate and vote on motions over the weekend. 22 constituency associations are demanding a leadership review of Kenney in the next 3 months, and they represent the required 25% of boards needed to make that happen under the party's current rules. But members are expected to vote at the meeting on a contentious motion to increase that threshold to 29 associations. Alberta is the latest province to sign on to Ottawa's $10 a day childcare plan. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in Edmonton on Monday announcing the new deal with Premier Jason Kenney.
I think one of the things that really came through on this past year and a half is that making sure we have proper support for families, for proper support for young kids that will allow parents to get back to work is unbelievably important.
This agreement means bringing $3.8 billion tax dollars paid by Albertans to Ottawa back to Albertans to address a key priority for so many families. This means that parents in Alberta will see a reduction in their fees of an average of 50% in early 2022 and will pay an average of $10 a day by 2025-26. The province has secured a deal that allows Alberta parents to have the type of childcare that works best for them, which has been a key element of any deal that this government would sign. This means that all types of licensed childcare for kids aged up to kindergarten, like preschools, daycare, and licensed family day homes, will now be supported through this deal with the federal government.
Alberta and Ontario were the remaining holdouts to the Liberal government's $30 billion 5-year childcare plan, which promises to cut childcare to an average of $10 per day across the country. Coming up, in the past, Alberta has always experienced strong economic drivers, but based on a forecast by ATB Financial, Albertans may have to manage their expectations. Welcome back. Up next, Hal Roberts chats with National Post reporter Tyler Dawson about Alberta recovery and an Indigenous group's court action against a Liberal tanker ban.
Let's talk about the $10 a day childcare deal that Alberta signed on to. The $3.8 billion plan will create about 40,000 daycare spaces and secure $10 a day daycare over the next 5 years. But sadly, Tyler, it's not condition-free like Quebec's.
That's right. So some of the conditions basically, well, it's more condition-free than some of the other deals. Let's maybe start there. The original call from the Liberals was for this to be basically not-for-profit daycare spaces, and there has been some wiggle room on that in this Alberta deal, that it might cover some for-profit spaces. It doesn't cover sort of unlicensed spaces, whether that, that's nannies or grandparents or something like that. So there's not sort of the full level of flexibility basically that the Alberta government had been asking for. But this was, I think, one of those things that Jason Kenney simply could not avoid, could not push back on too hard. I think it's one of those things. Certainly in my life, that the young moms that I know, this is the issue for them. Nothing is more important to them than $10 a day daycare. So I think for Jason Kenney on this front, probably any deal is a good deal. Whether or not he got everything he wanted, of course, the NDP is saying, well, look, this is the deal that we proposed months ago. This was our idea, and this is what we ended up with. So I do think you'll probably see a little bit of jostling, let's say, on that, and it could be a little bit of an election issue. And I would just throw that prediction out because, of course, this isn't going to happen overnight. As you said, this is sort of a 5-year plan. So if we look, a year and a half down the road, and then we say, how many of those 40,000 daycare spaces have been created? Well, all of a sudden, if it's not that many, that's an election issue for the UCP. All of a sudden, if it is a lot, that's great for the UCP, and they can campaign on that. So we're about at that point, I think, in the governance cycle when everything you can kind of look at and say, how is that going to affect them as we come into election season in a year and a half or so.
ATB Financial is predicting that Alberta will be back to pre-pandemic levels of employment by June of next year. Now, it's not quite the boom times that we're used to, but still a solid economic recovery. The recent Amazon deal and a boost in oil prices is really helping Alberta to see the largest growth in the country next year. Do you think this will help the UCP?
Well, that's a great question, and I think it probably will. I mean, it's hard to imagine it not, right? Things are so dire for the UCP right now in so many ways that any economic boost is going to be a very good thing. There's a few things to note on some of the economic forecasts. The first is that Alberta contracted the most out of anywhere else in the country, with the exception, I think, of the Northwest Territories in terms of economic performance last year. So basically, there's a lot of room to grow. The other thing is that pre-pandemic levels is important, of course, because Alberta has not exactly been booming since 2014, 2016 in that sort of time area. But there clearly is a recovery on the horizon. The question a little bit is, when is that going to come? How big is that recovery going to be? And what is that actually going to look like in terms of, is this going to be an oil and gas driven sort of mini boom this time? Is it going to be something else? But that's a long way of me getting around to saying that this absolutely is going to benefit Jason Kenney. It's absolutely going to benefit the UCP. Obviously still at a risk. We just talked about the fifth wave. Who knows? Something could go sideways. There could be a new variant. Not to fearmonger too much, but lots of factors, I think, going into the next sort of year and a half of Jason Kenney's premiership going into the election. But the economy, of course, was always one of the really, really big questions. So it's very notable to see these sort of predictions coming out from analysts.
Alberta's promising to fund litigation by 2 Métis groups that are seeking to fight the Liberals' tanker ban off the northwest BC coast. Now, Tyler, many Indigenous groups are fighting to get our resources to market.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a throwback, isn't it? I mean, I feel like we haven't talked about the tanker ban very much the last little while. But that, of course, was the ban on heavy tanker traffic that would basically be transporting crude oil. So this would have been sort of if the Northern Gateway pipeline had been finished, that would have been an issue. But there's this litigation fund that the Alberta government set up, I think, as part of their fight back strategy. But if not directly part of the fight back strategy, then sort of directly adjacent to it, that essentially helps Indigenous groups fund lawsuits against the Alberta government, or I don't know, against the BC government. So in this case, it's against the federal government because it's federal legislation. And so we'll see where that ends up, see where that lawsuit goes. Of course, a little bit controversial because the Métis Nation of Alberta says that these are not actually, sort of representative groups of Métis people in Alberta. So a little bit of other drama in this announcement as well. But certainly that's a lawsuit that I'll be trying to keep my eye on because I think it's very interesting what could happen with that piece of legislation.
Coming up next, a rally was held at the University of Lethbridge, but this time it's on behalf of faculty members. And by the way, if you're watching us on YouTube, please give us a like and hit that subscribe button. We'll be right back. A rally was held Wednesday at the University of Lethbridge protesting recent cuts to post-secondary education. The University of Lethbridge Faculty Association hosted the rally. I caught up with its president this week, who tells me it's been more than 500 days since their collective agreement has reached a settlement. Take a look. What types of other issues are under negotiation? What exactly is your grievance?
Well, there's a number of issues under negotiation. I would say that the biggest issue that the rally is really about is the slow pace of movement on all of the issues. Okay. This time, last round of negotiations, which went quite slowly, we settled our agreement. This time, we're 500 days past the end of the collective agreement, and we've reached agreement on less than a half dozen articles. And even more important, very many of the articles that we have discussed have only been passed once, maybe twice across the table. And we've been finding it hard to get meeting times with the administration. We've been finding it hard to get meaningful movement on the things that they're presenting. So I would say the initial problem is simple lack of movement at the table. Mm-hmm. You can't have a successful contract negotiation if you're not prepared to meet, and then you can't finish the negotiations if you're not prepared to take water with your wine occasionally. Mm-hmm. The specific issues that are causing trouble right now are we're being asked for a -4 retroactive pay cut for money we've already paid taxes on. We're also looking at a number of changes in the way that governance works in the university, including, for instance, the way grievances are handled, shortening the period of time when somebody can point out that something improper has happened. Changes to academic freedom, which can be difficult for people not in the university world to understand, but basically the idea is to subordinate academic freedom to the business interests of the university, which sounds like it makes a lot of sense, except then you end up with a situation like we just had in Florida, where the university can say, well, we don't want to alienate the provincial government, so even though what you have to say and you're an expert in this area is important, we'd rather you just didn't say anything. And that's not why the citizens of Lethbridge fought to have a university in a city this size.
Yeah, true. Now, Dan, I know that you're an association working on behalf of faculty members. Who is your union, by the way? Are you currently under AUPE?
No, we are the union. So the University of Lethbridge Faculty Association was turned into a union as a result of a Supreme Court decision going back about 2012, I think.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for clearing that up for me. I know a lot of the staff at the U of L are AUPE, but I was a little bit curious about the faculty members because I didn't think that you fell under that category. So that's great to have that clarification.
No, we don't. We're our own union.
Yeah, and so who exactly are you negotiating with? Is it the university itself? Is it the province?
Well, that's actually an interesting question. The short answer is we should be negotiating with the university. We should be negotiating with the Board of Governors of the University of Lethbridge, and the Board of Governors of the University of Lethbridge should be looking out for the best interests of the faculty, of the students, and frankly of the city of Lethbridge. In actual practice, we seem to be negotiating with the government of Alberta via the Board of Governors. We are told whenever we're asked that the money that is being offered, there is no choice. It's being set by the provincial government. We're told that the provincial government wants to see the university restructured. We're told that the provincial government has all sorts of plans for how the university that Lethbridge has needs to be reorganized. And unfortunately, I think that's contributing to this lack of movement and this uncertainty, because if you don't feel, if you're a member of the Board of Governors or if you're a member of the administration and you don't feel that you actually run the university, then I can see that it is difficult to make the kind of compromises that are necessary to keep the university as good as it is.
So what type of impact is this having on staff and students at the U of L?
Well, I think it's horrible. It's horrible for the employees. It's horrible for the students. Whenever you have negotiations that have gone on as long as this, 500 days, we're getting close to 2 years. That brings uncertainty. I can understand that parents around the country, parents in Lethbridge, would sit and say, geez, I'm wondering if my kids should go to this university, or is there going to be trouble there? I mean, how are they going to resolve this?
After the break, we speak with a new business located at the University of Lethbridge that fills a need for some Southern Alberta weed. Stay with us.
It was a lot of putting together a proposal to present to the administration of the university.
Welcome back. A new local business venture here in Lethbridge has set up an analytics lab for cannabis at the University of Lethbridge. The company, called Blue Sky Analytical Labs, has already won the new Business of the Year award from the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce. Ross Tisdale joined me this week to chat all about it. Take a look. How long ago did this collaboration take place, and when did you start the company?
It's been about 2 years in the making to get us to where we are now. And it was a lot of putting together a proposal to present to the administration of the university. And it lined up really well with just leveraging underutilized equipment that was here on campus. And so just trying to put a need purpose to something that was already there. It was already existing infrastructure, and to just try to leverage it properly. Okay, and so essentially we put that agreement together, pitched it to the university, and yeah, they were very helpful and happy to start working with us.
Okay, well, that's kind of cool. So how much lab analysis work was leaving our region before your company was set up?
Almost all of it. There is one other laboratory in town, Down to Earth Labs, and they deal primarily with soil sampling. And even some of the tests that they do go up to Calgary just because it's not exactly their focus. So anything outside of that was going to Calgary. And it seems like with Lethbridge, with the size of our city, there's a few things like that that people were just used to relying on larger city centers for that. And we feel that there's more than enough demand in Southern Alberta for us to have a dedicated laboratory in our region to things outside of soil sampling.
Yeah, no, exactly. So it sounds like your company is starting to make a big impact on the local area. So can you maybe tell us a bit about the economic impact of your lab facility?
Well, certainly. So there is a fairly large amount of producers in Alberta, and whenever they're having their cannabis analyzed, there are a few labs in Alberta, but a lot of the work is going out to Ontario. And from our understanding, there is not a lab in Alberta that can do the entire Health Canada suite of required tests in-house. There's particularly the pesticides portion of it requires some very specialized equipment. And so we happen to have that here on campus. And so with that, we should be the only laboratory in all of Alberta that can do that entire Health Canada suite of tests. And so having that local, of course, it means keeping revenue in our local economy here, but it also means for faster turnaround times for companies, which of course the logistics of just being closer also means for a reduction in costs.
It does sound very analytical and very science-y. So you're in the university. So what about the students at the U of L? Have you been able to hire graduates from there?
It's almost serendipitous how it's formed, because really the three most critical factors that we need to run this business, we just naturally found. And that is chemistry with Jackson Knott, with his master's in chemistry, and microbiology, which Luke brings in, getting his PhD, and then of course the business side of it, which I'm just finishing up my MBA right now. And so, with the business, the chemistry, and the microbiology, particularly for the requirements of the cannabis testing, that is exactly what's needed. And so to have the three of us come together and really enjoy working together and enjoy what we're doing, to be able to have all the required skills with such a small team has just been absolutely amazing. And we've got plans to hire more students for some database programming work as well as some market analysis work.
We know that universities are great at developing collaborations. So how about on the local business side? Are there any businesses here that you've been able to forge a business relationship with?
Certainly. I mean, I've already mentioned Down to Earth Labs. So we're in the works of doing some sample work with them. Bridge Bud Supply, we're very good friends with them. And so they've got quite a few retail stores in Southern Alberta. And certainly outside of that, we've had a lot of businesses reaching out and looking for testing outside of cannabis too. Though cannabis is our focus, we do water testing, and we offer just general science consulting for some of the questions that people might not even know what to ask. And we've had quite a few people reach out to us with some interesting things. So absolutely, we're more than happy to collaborate with any local business that has analytical needs.
Next, we'll feature some of the top local stories from around Southern Alberta. Stay with us.
And I have comfort in the fact that I got to tell him I love him and that I got to kiss him goodbye. So that for me is a gift.
The City of Lethbridge's bus service, CityLink, has been a hot-button topic since it was implemented earlier in August. Bridge City News has spoken to a number of Lethbridge residents who have complained about the efficiency of the program in the past. Lethbridge Transit General Manager Tim Sanderson says the city has heard the complaints, and starting Wednesday, new service level adjustments will be made to help improve the program.
So one of the big changes that we're making is we're switching the schedules on the 51 and 52 over on the west side, and that really allows for more possibilities and more alternatives for people living in those areas in order to get to university. That's probably one of the biggest changes that we're making, although we did make smaller changes all across the system, really just to help with connectivity, with making transfers, and with keeping our service on time. The second big announcement that we're making is we're opening up the ATB hub for availability for demand zones on the west side of the city as well. We think that that's something that our customers have really asked a lot about, and we're really happy to do it after we've been studying it for the last couple of months. So.
Shelters are also being added to the hub stations to offer riders cover from the winter weather. November 17th marked 2 years since a young Lethbridge man went missing. After searching for answers, the only thing his family has left is hope. I spoke with Marshall Iwasa's mom on that anniversary as the family held a virtual vigil. Tammy Johnson lights these little tea light candles as a beacon of hope. They mark a 2-year anniversary of the beginning of a family nightmare.
Like everyone says, time heals all wounds. It doesn't feel that way.
It was exactly 2 years ago on the evening of November 16th that she last saw her 26-year-old son, Marshall Iwasa, before he disappeared into the night. She's the last known loved one to see him.
And I have comfort in the fact that I got to tell him I love him and that I got to kiss him goodbye. So that for me is a gift.
Leaving her west side home for a storage facility on Lethbridge's north side, he told his mom he'd be heading back to Calgary after that. His last known whereabouts was his storage unit on the morning of November 17, 2019. His security code showed he'd entered at 6 a.m., then left an hour and a half later. That's the last sign of Marshall anywhere. Then, a week later, his torched truck was located in the backcountry of Pemberton, British Columbia.
It's unbelievable. There's times I can't believe this is really happening to my family. And that's the hard part.
Iwasa has been listed with the National Center for Missing Persons. In a press release sent out today, Lethbridge Police Service says they continue to investigate the case and that a new search near the truck site is anticipated this spring. But there's been very few answers to his disappearance. Yet his mom lights these tea lights because in a case where there's been so little of it, they shine as a beacon of hope.
The only thing that I keep focusing on and staying hopeful is that we'll find answers and that we'll hopefully find Marshall.
For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Roche. This year marks the 15th anniversary of the Christmas Hope campaign in Lethbridge. It's a multi-agency collaboration consisting of 6 local organizations. The partnership ensures less fortunate members of our community get many items they need for Christmas.
This collective will help about 2,000 adults and 4,500 children with supplies needed during this holiday season. And that's a pretty big number. We know there's a big need in Lethbridge, so we're asking our residents to do what they can to help each other out. I look forward to contributing myself in a variety of manners, and I'll have more information to share by next week.
The whole excitement is to see the families that are in need and to be able to put something in front of them, right? The toys and the gifts are just a special time of year. And I do some work at the Correctional Center, and I see the tears as they write out their angel tree requests and know they won't be with their kids this year. And so to help families like that is just like it's right at my heart.
We have seen a steady increase since about March at the food banks, and we are expecting to serve 2,000 adults and 4,500 children for Christmas this year.
You can find out more information about how to donate toys, food, or cash at christmashope.ca. Coming up after the break, I speak with a Lethbridge pastor who used to offer spiritual guidance to professional football players. That's next. Keep it right here.
This is in the early 70s, and sport and Jesus were like way disconnected. The church wasn't even sure what to do about Christian athletes.